And then came the verdict, broadcast across the country.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count one of the charges. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged.
Carlie Brucia's mother broke down crying and said, "Thank you, Jesus." Carlie's father simply nodded in approval. Joseph Smith, guilty on all counts. Bailiff.
I will now be preparing to present further evidence on November the 28th, and will be arguing that a sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole is the best decision in this case.
I lost one of the most precious things to me in my life because of an animal, a disgusting, perverted animal.
The jury took 5 hours to pour over the evidence. The surveillance video, the letter that Smith sent to his brother, and the recorded conversations between Smith and his mother where he admitted killing her.
Welcome to Blackout Crime Files. Before I give you a single name, before one date, I want you to sit with a question. At what point does a system stop being an institution and become a liability, not a rhetorical question? A real one. Because this case, every layer of it forces that question into the open and refuses to let it close. A man with 13 arrests walks out of a courtroom over $400. A child walks into a parking lot. The distance between those two events is a series of decisions made by people with authority, with documentation, with every reason to act differently. They didn't. And I want to be precise throughout what follows. What is confirmed, I will attribute by name and outlet. What is alleged, I will call alleged. What the record leaves unresolved, I will leave unresolved, out loud, inside the narration, not buried in a disclaimer at the end. This is not a story about a monster who appeared from nowhere. It is a story about a monster the state knew by name, by file number, by fingerprint, and kept letting go. Carlie Brucia was 11 years old. Let's go no Amber Alert infrastructure in Florida. February 1st, 2004, the system did not exist in that state in operational form. No automated broadcast, no highway signs, no mass notification pushing a child's description to the phones and dashboards of every driver within 50 miles of Sarasota, no school referral. No counselor flag, no welfare check attached to anyone in her orbit, no open case number connected to the man who would take her. Now set that against what existed. What was written down, filed, stamped, and processed through the Florida court system over 11 years, 13 arrests. 1993 through 2004, heroin possession, prescription drug fraud, cocaine, a kidnapping charge tried before a jury, acquitted but charged, prison time. 8 days between one release and the next arrest. 8 days free before the machinery caught him again. And then weeks before Super Bowl Sunday, another probation violation. He appeared before a judge. The judge reviewed the file, reviewed the violation, and declined to jail him, the documented reason confirmed in court filings and reported by the Sarasota Herald Tribune, an unpaid balance of $411, not a risk assessment, not a public safety matrix, a fine. Susan Scorpin stood outside the Sarasota County Judicial Center after the conviction and said, "He should never have been out of jail. The laws regarding repeat offenders and probation violators need to change. This should never have happened." She said it quietly, like someone who had rehearsed it so many times it had stopped feeling like anger and started feeling like fact. At 6:18 p.m. on February 1st, 2004, a pale yellow 1992 Buick Century station wagon pulled into the rear lot of Eve's Car Wash at 4715B Ridge Road in Sarasota. It circled, exited onto the road, slowed to near stop, turned back in. At 6:21 p.m., a motion-activated rear camera caught a young girl entering the frame, red t-shirt, blue jeans, pink backpack, 3 minutes. That is the gap between a predator positioning himself and a child walking into his path. 3 minutes the system had been building toward for 11 years. Carlie Jane Brucia was born March 16th, 1992, on Long Island, New York. She had 8 days left until her 12th birthday when she was taken. She sang in the choir at McIntosh Middle School in Sarasota. She played sports. She had a cat she treated like a member of the family and a younger half-brother she doted on without being asked to. Her school principal told reporters in the days after she went missing that Carlie was a shining light, then caught herself and said, "I don't want that to sound like something we say. That was genuinely who she was, every day." She loved Jennifer Lopez. She loved them all. She believed, in the way some kids just do, that a well-placed hug resolved most disputes, and the people around her said that for her, it usually did. When her parents divorced, she moved to Sarasota with her mother, Susan. But she never let Long Island go. Every winter break, every summer, she made the trip north. Christmas there was her favorite time of year. She was the kind of child who maintained love across distance without being taught how. Susan had remarried. Carlie was close with her stepfather, Stephen. Her life in Sarasota was full: choir, sports, friends, a cat, a little brother, a mother who checked in with other parents before letting her walk anywhere alone. That last part matters. The night before she disappeared, Carlie slept over at a friend's house on the near side of Bee Ridge Road. Nothing unusual. The following afternoon she was ready to go home. Her friend's mother picked up the phone and called Susan first. "She wants to walk. Is that all right?" Susan's answer was immediate. "No, I don't want her on that road by herself. Stephen's coming." The call ended. Stephen got his keys somewhere in the minutes between that conversation and his car reaching the street. Carlie decided not to wait. Less than a mile. She had walked it before. She would be home before he even turned onto her road. She put on her red t-shirt, her blue jeans. She picked up her pink backpack. She was 11 years old and she never made it home. Joseph Peter Smith. Born March 17, 1966 in Brooklyn. He turned 38 the month after he killed Carlie Brucia, a car mechanic by trade, a father of 3 daughters, a man the Florida criminal justice system had been cataloging since 1993 and releasing back into Sarasota with the consistency of a tide. 13 arrests, heroin, prescription fraud, cocaine, a kidnapping charge a jury acquitted him of. Acquitted, not cleared. 8 days between one release from custody and the next arrest. He was renting a room from a couple named Jeff and Naomi in Sarasota. He had regular access to their pale yellow 1992 Buick Century station wagon. Access, not ownership. That distinction would crack his alibi open. He wore a mechanic's uniform with a name badge on the chest. His brother John later described the hours after February 1st to federal agents in detail. At approximately 11 p.m. that night, Joseph appeared at John's front door, still in his uniform. His usual sneakers gone, replaced by a pair of boots John had never seen before. New, stiff, like he had put them on for the first time that evening. Joseph stood in the doorway and said nothing for a moment. Then, "Do you want to talk about something?" John looked at him. "No." He shut the door. The next morning, Joseph showed up at John's workplace. He went to the sink and washed his hands. Turned them under the water, pressed the soap in, rinsed. Did it again. Clean hands, still washing. John watched him from across the room. At some point, Joseph stepped close and kept his voice low. "I might need to leave the state. Soon." John said nothing. Later, when he sat across from FBI agents and described that morning, he told them, "If he did this, he will never admit it. He will take it to the grave. You're not going to get the truth out of him." He knew his brother. Susan Scorpin spent the years between Carlie's death and her own fighting for a law, not a memorial, not a scholarship. A law, one with teeth, one that targeted the exact judicial latitude that had placed a $400 unpaid balance above a public safety decision and let Joseph Smith walk out of a courtroom and into a Sarasota neighborhood. Carlie's law was signed by Governor Jeb Bush in 2005. It tightened probation violation enforcement statewide. It removed the discretionary space that had, in this case, cost an 11-year-old girl everything. According to coverage by the Tampa Bay Times, advocates pushed the bill through the Florida legislature in under a year from Carlie's death, one of the fastest single-case legislative responses in state history. The car wash footage had made this case national. The national attention made inaction politically impossible. At the sentencing hearing, Susan Scorpin addressed the court. Her voice was steady. She said, "I want my daughter back. I can't have that, so I want justice. And I want every parent in this state to know that the law will hold the people who threaten their children, because it didn't hold for mine." Carlie's father, Joseph Brucia, spoke to reporters after the guilty verdict with exactly 5 words. "I am happy with the verdict." The restraint of a man who understood that anything more would have let the moment become about his pain instead of his daughter's life. Susan Scorpin did not live to see Joseph Smith die. Smith died on death row on July 26, 2021, at Union Correctional Institution in Ryford, Florida. He was 55. Cause of death was never publicly specified, pending autopsy results that were never released to media. Joseph Brucia told Fox 13 Tampa Bay that he was elated. He said, "The inept and corrupt criminal justice system could not get it done, so the natural order of things finally took care of it." 5 words at the conviction, 1 long sentence at the death, both of them exact, Saturday, January 31st, 2004. Carlie is at a friend's house near Bee Ridge Road. Sleepover. She has done this before. Nothing about the evening is different from a dozen previous Saturday nights. Sunday, February 1st. Super Bowl XXXVII. 90 million Americans are watching pregame coverage. Sarasota is quiet in the way residential streets go quiet when the whole country is sitting still indoors. By early evening, Carlie is ready to leave. Her friend's mother makes the call. Susan says no to the walk. Stephen is already moving. Carlie doesn't wait. At 6:18 p.m., the pale yellow Buick enters the rear lot of Eve's Car Wash on Bee Ridge Road. Sarasota County Sheriff's Office investigators would later confirm what the footage showed. It circles the lot, exits onto the road, slows almost to a stop, turns back in. Not a driver looking for parking. A driver who has already found what he came for and is repositioning. At 6:21 p.m., the motion-activated rear camera captures Carlie entering the frame. Red t-shirt. Blue jeans. The pink backpack her mother had described to Stephen on the phone less than an hour earlier. The one she told him to look for on the sidewalk. A man enters the frame within seconds. 5'8", dark hair. A tattoo on one forearm, mechanic's uniform. Name badge on the chest, blurred past reading in the original footage. He walks toward her. They exchange words. His body language does not suggest urgency. He is not rushing, not grabbing immediately. He speaks to her first. She responds. Then he reaches out, closes his hand around her arm, and walks her out of frame. 10 seconds. The whole thing, Stephen drives the route. Nobody on the sidewalk. No pink backpack moving through the early dark. He circles. Still nothing. He would describe that second pass to investigators later, the moment the absence stopped being a delay and became something he had no word for. Around 7:00 p.m., the 911 call is placed. My daughter is missing. She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends. And when was the last time she was seen? 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. 21 minutes before the camera at Eve's Car Wash recorded what it recorded. A bloodhound named Ruby was brought in with one of Carlie's pillowcases. She tracked the scent through the neighborhood without hesitation. Straight to the rear lot of Eve's Car Wash, she stopped there. Nose down, circling the same patch of asphalt. The scent ended. As though Carlie had been lifted from the ground at that exact point and carried off in something. The footage hit every major national broadcast within 24 hours. It played on loop while half the country was still in their Super Bowl gear. Within 48 hours, more than 800 calls had reached the tip lines. Step outside the timeline with me for a moment. A judge reviewed Joseph Smith's probation violation, reviewed his file, and released him over $411 in unpaid fines. That is a real decision a real person made inside a real courtroom with full access to his history. I want to know what you think about that. Drop your location in the comments right now, city, state, wherever you're watching from, and answer this. Should judicial discretion in probation cases have hard limits, or does removing that discretion create a different problem? One sentence. I'll read every one. Now come back in. Because the tip lines are about to deliver a name. Out of more than 800 calls, multiple independent teepsters, no connection to each other, no coordination, landed on the same person. Joseph Peter Smith. One call stood apart from the rest. A woman who had worked alongside Smith at a Sarasota repair shop contacted investigators and told them she had no uncertainty whatsoever. According to accounts later reported by the Associated Press, she said she recognized the way the man moved before she could read his face. She watched him reach for Carlie's arm on the footage and said it was the same motion he used to reach across a workbench for tools. Identical. Her husband called it in before she had finished the sentence. Detective Vincent Reaver drove to Smith's address with backup. A neighbor confirmed someone was inside. Officers knocked. No answer. Smith was on active probation. That gave investigators an approach that bypassed the probable cause threshold. They contacted his probation officer and waited at the property. Naomi, one of the homeowners, pulled into the driveway. In the pale yellow Buick, her husband Jeff arrived minutes later. He told investigators immediately that his wife had the timeline wrong. He was the one who had driven that vehicle. When he checked it, the rear seat was folded flat. Items inside had been moved. He surrendered it to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office for forensic processing without being asked twice. Officers brought Smith outside. They held up a still image from the car wash footage. He looked at it, a pause that lasted long enough for everyone present to register it. That looks like me, but it's not me. It does look like you. That's why we're having this conversation. Wow, yeah, that would not be me. Honest to God, I would never put anybody through that. How do we get past this? That's just verifying where I was at 6:21. That's exactly what we're trying to do. He consented to a search. Officers found the mechanic's uniform in his room, name badge on the chest, drug paraphernalia in the vehicle. Smith was taken into custody on the probation violation and possession charges. Miranda rights were read. He asked for a lawyer and said nothing further. NASA, confirmed by investigators in statements reported by the Orlando Sentinel, was brought in to enhance the name badge image. When the results returned, the badge was legible for the first time. It read, Joe. On February 4th, John Smith walked into a Sarasota police station and asked to speak with the FBI. He told agents he and his girlfriend had watched the footage together. Both placed Joseph without hesitation. His girlfriend had pointed specifically to the gate. Back surgery had permanently altered the way Joseph moved, in a way anyone who had spent time around him could identify from a grainy recording. That evening, John picked up his phone and called the FBI, believing incorrectly that his line was being tapped. It was not. When the agent answered, John said, "I'm guessing you've already heard what he told me. What am I supposed to do now?" 3 agents were in their vehicles within minutes. At John's house, the full account came out. Joseph had not delivered a clean admission, but he had broken, wept, apologized, come apart in fragments. And when John had pressed him directly, had said the words out loud, "Joe, she's gone. Where is she? We have to find her." Joseph had given him an address, 6221 Proctor Road, near Interstate 75, behind the Central Church of Christ. John also admitted something extraordinary in that same conversation with agents. After leaving the station earlier that day, he had driven to the location himself. He said that if he had found Carlie alive, his plan was to free her, give her money, photograph her, sell the image to a media outlet, and use the money to hire Joseph a better lawyer. I'm not going to editorialize that. I'm going to let it sit there exactly as it happened, because that admission, from a man simultaneously trying to cooperate with federal agents, tells you something about the gravity Smith's own family felt closing in around them. Officers moved before dawn. In heavy brush at the edge of a field behind the Central Church of Christ, they found Carlie Brucia. She had been missing for 4 days. Biological material recovered from her clothing was submitted for DNA analysis. The match to Joseph Peter Smith, per prosecution materials at trial, returned a probability of coincidental match at 1 in 32 quintillion. A jury deliberated 5 hours. Guilty. I want to draw a clear line here between what the evidence establishes and what it leaves open. Smith was an active drug user throughout the period preceding February 1st. His arrest history across 11 years involved heroin and cocaine. John Smith told federal agents that when Joseph appeared at his door that night, he appeared to be under the influence of something. That is an observation from a family member, not a toxicology result. I will not present it as more than what it is. No prior relationship between Smith and Carlie has ever been established. No connection between their families. She was not a personal target. She was a child who walked into the path of a man the state had processed and released without the intervention her proximity to him demanded. Smith was also, according to investigative reporting by the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, a suspect in the 2000 death of 25-year-old Tara Riley in Sarasota County. That case was never prosecuted. I raise it not as evidence of a pattern I can prove, but as a fact in the public record that belongs in any complete account of who Joseph Smith was. John told the FBI directly. He will never admit this fully. He will take what he knows to the grave. He was almost right. Smith died in a cell in Ryford, Florida, on July 26, 2021, without ever addressing the full scope of what he did. The partial admission to his brother, wrung out in a jail visiting room while John believed agents were listening, was the closest thing to a confession the family ever received. What drove Smith at that specific moment, on that specific road, the record does not answer with certainty. What it answers without ambiguity is this. The system had his name, his file, his fingerprints, his history, and multiple opportunities to hold him. It did not. Carlie Brucia absorbed every consequence of that choice. Carlie Brucia would be 33 years old right now. She would have graduated high school the year after she was taken. Gone somewhere after that, college, a city, a career, a life assembled from the same small decisions every person makes across their 20s. She was 11. She had most of her story left to write, and it was ended in under 10 seconds behind a car wash while 90 million people watched a football game less than a mile away. Joseph Peter Smith died on death row on July 26, 2021. He died before a resentencing hearing, triggered by a Supreme Court ruling requiring jury unanimity in capital cases, could be held. His jury had voted 10-2. The legal machinery was already moving to revisit that when his body gave out in Ryford. He never faced that second courtroom. His brother John, who drove to a field in the dark to see if his brother's confession was true, and whose phone call to the FBI cracked the case open, John had to carry that. What that wait looks like years later, the public record does not say. Susan Scorpin never saw Smith die. She fought for the law that carries her daughter's name, and then she was gone before the ending she had worked for arrived. What remains is Carlie's law. A father who said 5 words at the conviction and 1 long sentence at the death, and meant every syllable of both. A case that forced a state to look at what its courts had been doing with dangerous men and ask whether discretion was worth the price. The answer, in this case, was written in 4 days of searching and a field behind a church on Proctor Road. Accountability and empathy are not opposites. You can hold both. You can grieve for a child, demand answers from the system that failed her, and refuse to let the complexity of how law works become a reason to stop asking hard questions. That refusal is the only honest response to a case like this. Carlie deserved better than the hand she was dealt on that Sunday evening. The record is clear on that. Everything else is the work of making sure it doesn't happen again. If this case stayed with you, share it. Put it in front of someone who wouldn't look on their own. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me what you're still thinking about. I'm Blackout Crime Files. I'll see you in the next one.